My name is Claire and I am 28 years old. 3 days after my father's funeral, my stepmother called me and said 9 words that revealed exactly who she had always been. This house belongs to me now. Pack your things. 72 hours. That was how long she had waited. Not out of respect. Not out of grief. 72 hours was simply how long she had needed to be absolutely certain before making her move. I was sitting on my childhood bed holding one of my father's gardening books when she called. The room around me was unchanged from childhood. The desk, the window overlooking the garden he had tended every Saturday with the devotion of a man who found peace in growing things. I had been sitting there for an hour simply breathing, existing in the suspended unreality of early grief where the world keeps moving and you cannot believe it has the nerve. Then Sandra called. This house belongs to me now. Pack your things. I had not loved Sandra. I had not hated her either. For 6 years, I had simply accepted her the way you accept weather, as a condition of your life you didn't choose and couldn't change. She had been pleasant enough on the surface. Warm when my father was watching. Efficient when he wasn't. Always slightly more interested in what the house contained than in the people living inside it. I had noticed. I had filed it away. Now I understood. I had filed away exactly the wrong things. He's been gone 3 days, I said. I know how long he's been gone, she said. I know what the will says. The house is in my name. I need you to make arrangements. I hung up. I sat on my bed and looked at his garden through the window, still growing quietly without him, the way life does, and felt 2 things simultaneously. Grief. The shapeless, devastating grief of losing the only parent who had raised me since I was 9. And something harder and colder and far more useful. Anger. My father had never once mentioned the will. We had talked about everything: his health, the garden, my career, his memories of my mother who had left when I was small. Everything except what would happen to what he had built. I called my Aunt Margaret, his sister, the woman who had sat beside me at the funeral and held my hand through the whole service without saying a single unnecessary word. Auntie Margaret, I said when she answered. Did you know about the will? Silence. A specific silence. Come to me tomorrow, she said. There are things you need to know. I drove to her house the next morning through October rain. She met me at the door, pulled me inside, made tea without asking, and sat across from me at her kitchen table with the expression of a woman who has been carrying something for too long and is finally putting it down. Your father changed his will 8 months ago, she said. Sandra pushed for it. She told him it was the practical thing, that having the house in both names created legal complications. She paused. He told me about it afterward. He wasn't sure. But he trusted her. I sat with that. 8 months ago. 8 months of Sandra knowing exactly what she had secured. 8 months of pleasant surfaces and warm performances while underneath she had already decided what happened next. Is there anything left for me? I said. Margaret looked at her tea. A small savings account, she said. $12,000. Everything else, the house, the investments, his pension, it all transfers to her. $12,000. 6 years of Sandra. 6 years of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and watching my father love a woman who had apparently been calculating the entire time. $12,000 and a gardening book. I drove home in the rain and sat in my car outside Sandra's house, my father's house, the house I had grown up in, and looked at the lights in the windows and felt the cold clarity of someone who has been shown something they cannot unsee. Sandra had not married my father. She had invested in him. And now she was collecting. I pulled out my phone. I called the only person I knew who could help me understand what came next. My college friend Diane's husband was an estate attorney. He answered on the second ring. I need to know, I said, if there is anything at all that can be done. He was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me everything. From the beginning. So I did. And when I finished, he said 4 words that changed the temperature of everything. When did he sign? The date mattered. That was what Diane's husband Thomas explained to me over 2 hours at his kitchen table the following evening, carefully, precisely, with the particular patience of someone who has learned to deliver complicated information to people who are also grieving. The date my father had changed his will mattered enormously. 8 months ago, I said. That's what Margaret told me. Thomas nodded slowly. And his diagnosis, when was that? I looked at him. What diagnosis? Thomas set down his pen. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has just understood that he knows something the person across from him does not. Claire, he said carefully, your father was diagnosed with early cognitive decline 14 months ago. Did you not know? The kitchen went very quiet. 14 months ago. 6 months before Sandra had convinced him to change the will. My father had been showing signs of cognitive decline, and Sandra had known. I drove to Margaret's house that night, knocked on the door at 9 p.m. She opened it immediately, still dressed, as if she had been expecting me, or perhaps simply unable to sleep. He was sick, I said. Before he died. His mind. She closed her eyes briefly. He made me promise not to tell you, she said. He didn't want you to worry. He didn't want you to look at him differently. She opened her eyes. I should have told you anyway. I'm sorry. I sat in her living room and she told me everything. The diagnosis. The slow progression. The good days and the harder days. The way Sandra had become increasingly involved in managing his finances, just to help. He gets confused sometimes until she was the one making most decisions while my father smiled and trusted and believed completely in the woman he had married. The will change had happened on a harder day. Thomas had already requested the medical records, already contacted the doctor who had treated my father, already used the words undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity in a way that made them sound less like legal terms and more like weapons. Sandra had made one critical mistake. She had moved too fast. The standard for challenging a will on grounds of cognitive impairment required evidence that the person lacked capacity at the time of signing. My father's medical records showed a documented harder period in the weeks surrounding the will change. His doctor had noted confusion, disorientation, susceptibility to suggestion. Sandra had chosen her moment carefully. She had not chosen carefully enough. This will take time, Thomas told me the next day. Months. Possibly longer. And it will be uncomfortable. She will fight it. I know, I said. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my father's garden. About the Saturday mornings. About a man who had raised me alone since I was 9 with the steady, faithful presence of someone who showed up every single day without making it a performance. About 72 hours. About 9 words delivered in a flat, precise voice by a woman who had been calculating from the beginning. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Sandra received the legal notice on a Thursday. She called me within the hour. Her voice was different. The pleasant surface completely gone, replaced by something I had always sensed underneath it and was now, finally, fully present. You have no idea what you're doing, she said. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. He wanted me to have that house. He wanted to trust the woman he married, I said. Those aren't the same thing. I hung up. And for the first time since my father died, I felt something move through the grief, not replacing it, not diminishing it, but existing alongside it. Purpose. Clear, cold, completely mine. Sandra had waited 72 hours because she thought I was broken. She had miscalculated. I was just getting started. The legal process took 8 months. I want to be honest about what 8 months looks like from the inside, because the version that moves cleanly from injustice to resolution in a single determined montage is not the true version. The true version has hard days and harder days. Depositions where Sandra sat across a conference table and looked at me with the cold eyes of someone who has decided I am an inconvenience to be managed. Documents and medical records and the slow, careful assembly of a case built from the evidence of my father's vulnerability and her exploitation of it. Thomas was extraordinary throughout. He worked with a precision that was almost beautiful, methodical, thorough, leaving nothing unexamined. He found the doctor's notes. He found the financial records showing Sandra's increasing control in the 14 months before my father's death. He found emails, actual emails, in which Sandra had discussed the will change with her sister 3 weeks before taking my father to sign it. Finally getting this sorted, she had written, "He's having a rough patch, so the timing works." The timing works. I read those words in Thomas's office on a Tuesday afternoon and felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for 8 months. Not anger anymore. Something quieter. The particular calm of someone who has been shown, in writing, exactly what they already knew. The mediation happened in June. Sandra arrived with her attorney, expensive, confident, the manner of someone who expects to win. She sat across the table and did not look at me directly, which I noted and found clarifying. People who have done the right thing look at you. People who know they haven't done the right thing look at the table. Thomas laid out the case. The diagnosis. The timeline. The documented harder period. The emails. The timing works. Sandra's attorney requested a recess after the emails. They returned 40 minutes later with a different posture. The settlement was not everything. The house remained contested. A full legal challenge would have taken another year and carried uncertainty. What we negotiated was this. Sandra kept the house. I received my father's investments, his pension value, and a sum that represented my fair inheritance from the estate he had built across a lifetime of Saturday mornings and steady faithful presence. It was not perfect justice, but it was real justice. The kind that exists in the actual world rather than the version where everything comes out exactly right. Sandra did not look at me when we left the mediation room. I looked at her. I wanted her to know that I saw her clearly, not with hatred, not with the ongoing burn of bitterness that would have cost me more than it cost her. Just clearly. The way you see something when you finally stop squinting. She had married my father for what he had. She had not understood what he actually was. What he actually was someone who raised a daughter who did not stay broken. I planted a garden that autumn. Not the same garden. I had a small apartment, a balcony, the modest square footage of a life being rebuilt. But I bought seeds. The same varieties my father had grown, tomatoes, herbs, the small stubborn flowers he had loved. I planted them in pots on my balcony and tended them with the particular attention of someone carrying forward something that matters. They grew. Of course they grew. My mother, the woman I had reconnected with through all of this, who had reached out when she heard about my father, who had shown up imperfectly and genuinely and asked what I needed, came to see the balcony garden in October. She stood looking at it for a long moment. "He would have loved this," she said. "I know," I said. She put her arm around me. We stood on my balcony in the October afternoon and looked at the small growing things, and I let myself feel fully, without management, the grief and the anger and the love and the strange imperfect beauty of a life that had been broken and was being rebuilt into something more honest than what came before. My father had trusted the wrong person. That was not his failure. That was his goodness. The goodness of a man who believed in people and showed up and grew things and raised a daughter alone for 19 years with steady, faithful love. His goodness had been exploited. Mine was going to be protected. I had learned the difference between trust and naivety, between forgiveness and forgetting, between the love that makes you vulnerable and the strength that makes you safe. I had learned at 28, in the hardest possible way, that the people who love you don't always protect you from the people who don't. Sometimes you have to protect yourself. I looked at my father's garden growing on my balcony. I picked up my trowel. And I kept tending.